Good morning everyone, it's Lisa here with you today on the Crafty Meraki YouTube channel. I do hope that you are all well. So with Christmas out of the way, it's about 4 or 5 days since Christmas that I'm recording this video. My thoughts have turned to Valentine's Day. And for today's video, I thought I would watercolour the Love Potions stamp set. And I'm going to be doing some watercolouring with my Karin markers. My sentiment is going to be from this set called Handmade Love. That's a hot foil plate, so that will be foiled. And these are the markers that I'm going to be using in today's video. So we're going to start off by heat embossing our image. So I'm going to white heat emboss this. So just taking the image out of the packaging and I'm placing that down onto some Strathmore Bristol Smooth cardstock. I'm going to prepare the cardstock with an anti-static powder bag. I brush off the excess powder and then I'm going to ink up my stamp with some Versamark ink. So that is a sticky ink and this is going to allow me to do the heat embossing. So once I have inked that up properly and pressed that down, I'm going to repeat the process and just double stamp it just to make sure I've got every bit of the stamp covered. So just applying the white embossing powder now. This is a fine white embossing powder as this is quite a detailed image. And then I'm going to take that off screen and heat set it. And I've now taped the panel down to a board with some low tack tape and I'm going to start by colouring 2 of the pink flowers. So the first colour that I'm going to be using is Cerise, and I won't talk you through all of the colouring, I'm just going to talk you through the colouring at the start, and for most of it I do 2 layers. Except for some of the leaves. So I'm starting off with my lightest pink here, which as I mentioned before is Cerise. So I've just added a tiny bit of that marker into the corner of that petal and I'm taking a water brush and I'm just going to blend that out so that it fades out towards the top of the petal. And I continue to work my way around that flower on the top right, just adding little bits of pigment into the corners of each of the areas and then just blending that out. And of course it is really difficult to see what I'm doing because the embossing powder is white on white cardstock. But as the image starts to get coloured, you can of course see that all come together. So just blending out those little individual areas with the cerise colour. And I am going to speed up the colouring. It took me about 40 minutes I think to do the colouring for this image. So I thought it would be better to just quicken up some of the colouring, but at the moment I'm just doing what you saw me do in real time, just adding little bits of that colour into those individual petals and blending that out, and then I'll leave that layer to dry whilst I go on and work on the other flowers in the image. And I think this is a really lovely image to colour. I love the kind of ratio of flowers to leaves and the addition of the berries as well. It all just balances so well and they all just look so pretty within sort of tumbling out of that bottle. So I've moved on here now to the berries and I'm using violet blue for my watercolouring here, and I don't have another purple, so when I do my second layer on these I actually just go back in with the same marker just to deepen up some of those areas. And I also use two greens as well for my colouring. This first green is quite a bright appley green. It's actually called grass. But I do also use lush green as well on some of the leaves, just to add a little bit of variation. And as you can see here, just going through the same process as I did for that first flower, adding tiny bits of pigment into each of the areas and blending that out so it's a little bit lighter towards the kind of outer edge. And I think when you heat emboss an image and you do watercolouring, it's a really good way to start with watercolouring, because the heat embossing actually provides little wells for you to add your colour into and blend it out. It can be a lot more forgiving than just trying to watercolour an image that may have been stamped with a black ink, for instance, or even a fade out ink if you were going to go for a no line watercolouring look. So it is pretty forgiving, and it's really good if you're a beginner to try watercolouring this way. And I'm going to finish the last two flowers now on this image, and I'm going to use an orange for those. So this is a really pretty orange, it's amber. And again, I'm just going to add those tiny bits in and blend them out. And all of the markers are actually really highly pigmented, so you only need a little bit in each of your areas to blend out to something that is actually quite soft in the end. We will add some more dimension and depth to the flowers with the second layer, but for now I just really want to see that image come to life. And that's what my first layer of colour does, at least visually for me. It really helps for me to see that as a whole before I go in and add in my extra detail with the second layer. I'm going to pop on a bit of music now for the rest of the colouring. I will put the marker names that I use up on the screen so that you know, and I will be back at the end of the colouring. I'll see you then. Now that we've come to the end of our colouring, I'm going to work on the background panel. So I've got a panel of £80 white cardstock here, and I'm going to add some score lines onto that. So from right to left, I'm actually starting off by putting the score lines quite wide apart, but they get narrower and closer together as I get nearer the left hand side. And this is just going to add a little bit of detail to the panel that's going to sit behind my flowers. And of course, with the score lines, you can choose to have either side of the panel as your background. I decided to have the raised score lines for mine, so I went ahead and trimmed that down, and I'm just going to add some wet adhesive onto the back of that, and then I'm going to add that to a top folding note card, which is actually made out of a soft grey cardstock. So making sure that's pressed firmly down, and I'm now going to go ahead and die cut my image. So I have heat set my image and did make sure that it was dry before I went ahead and put it through my Gemini Junior. I have made that mistake before and ended up smudging my image, so I was pretty careful to make sure that it was all dry. So that's the image now that it's cut out, and I've popped some foam tape onto the back, and I'm just going to hold it with some tweezers there and just see exactly where I want to position that over my background. And moving on to the sentiment now, I'm using the Handmade Love hot foil plate, and I do actually already have a bunch of these foiled from before. These were foiled using black foil, and so I'm just going to select which one I want to use, so just removing those from the packet. And I decide to go ahead and use the Hugs one. You can see there I've got lots of choices here, and plenty of cards that need to be made to use those up. But I do decide to go with the Hugs, and I'm just going to take that over my image now and just see whereabouts I want to position it. And so I add some foam tape onto the back, and then I just press that down. And to finish off my card, I'm going to add some Fairy Garden Meraki Sparkle gems. So I've got some on the top left there, and also some on the bottom right, and I've got a few on the image itself. And that brings us to the end of today's card. I hope that you enjoyed seeing that beautiful image come to light. Here is a look at the final card. Don't forget to give this a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. I will be back, of course, with another card for you in a week or so's time. But in the meantime, I hope that you have a wonderful day. Bye for now.